Hello, welcome to the Mid-Hudson Regional Information Center training for District Data Coordinators on the Level 0 Data Migration Hierarchy. This presentation is designed for District Data Coordinators from districts supported by the Mid-Hudson Regional Information Center. It is a brief tutorial focusing on the best practices related to the sequence for importing data to Level 0 and migrating that data to Level 1. In order to avoid error situations, it is important to import and migrate the domains in a specific order or hierarchy. To start, we need to understand the lingo. As in many areas, there is a language that is used when discussing data within Level 0 in the movement of that data through the data warehouse. As with all languages, terms or words are added or removed over time. The same has happened with Level 0 and data. Understanding that language and what has changed will help you to understand the conversation better. Here's a few key terms that will be used as we discuss the Level 0 migration hierarchy. First, let's look at the data itself and the terms used for that data. Domain is a term used to refer to a group of data that is related by Level 0 categories. The list of domains is shown here on the right. There is a distinction between student domains, those with a pink background, and staff domains, those with a gray background. Each domain contains various pieces of data related to students or staff, or sometimes both. A template is a term that is sometimes used interchangeably with domain. This term comes from the eScholar templates that define the format of the data that is imported in each domain. A template is defined for each domain shown here. The templates specify the data that is included, the location of that data within the file, and the format of that data. There are some additional templates defined in the eScholar documentation, but they do not relate to the hierarchy that we will address here today. And finally, data field is a term used to refer to the individual pieces of information contained within each template or domain. The next set of terms refer to the flow of the data from your source system into and through the data warehouse. Export or extract is used to refer to what you do to create a file containing specific data fields from your source system. Typically, source systems will build a file with the specific format required for import to Level 0 or the requested domain. For example, you might export demographics from your student management system, or you might export staff snapshot from your human resources system. Import. This describes the step that takes the file that was exported from your source system and moving it into Level 0. Migrate refers to moving data that has been imported in Level 0 and sending it on to Level 1. The migrate step is also referred to in various contexts as Level 1 data prep, upload, and lock and create. You will see Level 1 data prep in the Level 0 drop-down header from which you select the domain to migrate. You will see upload as the header in the Level 0 dashboard report column that shows the last time the data was migrated. And finally, lock and create is old terminology that was used for the migrate process when 2 steps were needed. Now, it's a 1-step process, so only one word is needed: migrate. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, So here is a graphical depiction of the data flow. To recap, data from your source system is imported to level 0 and then migrated to level 1. We will talk about both importing and migrating. The hierarchy should be applied to each process independently. For example, if the hierarchy shows that domain A is required prior to domain B, then domain A must be imported before domain B, and you must also migrate domain A prior to migrating domain B. You do not need to migrate domain A prior to importing domain B, however. For the remainder of this presentation, I will use the word migrate or migration. Keep in mind that the same sequence also applies when importing your data. You might wonder why the hierarchy is required. Well, each domain within level 0 is a collection of data fields, as we mentioned earlier. Some data fields are dependent on data fields in other domains. To ensure that the data will flow without error, or at least without errors due to hierarchy issues, some domains must be migrated before other domains. We will mention a few of the specific dependencies as we go through this presentation. Let's look at the full hierarchy. We will break it down a bit in a minute, but it is best practice to follow the order. Top of the list is staff snapshot. It needs to be imported first. Why, you might ask? Because one of the data fields in the demographics domain is dependent on data field in the staff snapshot domain. In this case, the dependency is on the counselor field. In order for that data to be migrated, there must be a staff snapshot record previously migrated with counselor data. Similarly, demographics must be migrated before enrollment. You cannot enroll a student if that student's information is not yet there. Logically, it follows that all domains containing student data are dependent on student demographics and enrollment. So, staff snapshot, demographics, and enrollment are the 3 domains required for almost all remaining domains with a few exceptions. These are your foundation. Best practice is to simply migrate these domains in this order every time before any others. Technically, once you've migrated staff snapshot once, demographics will likely migrate fine going forward, unless, of course, you have a new guidance counselor. Personally, since I may not know when a new guidance counselor is hired, I just do it first every time. It's just a good habit to establish. Coming in at number 4 is programs fact. It practically belongs with the foundation group, but for the most part, no other domains have dependencies on it. Typically, programs fact would be migrated next and with the same frequency as demographics and enrollment due to the variety of data that it contains and the frequency with which this data changes. Relative to other domains, programs fact data will often generate a significant number of errors. So migrating it frequently will help you to stay on top of it. Trust me, you don't want to wait on this. The list of errors will tend to grow, not shrink. There are a few domains that are not dependent on any others. They appear on the list in green. Some of these are not migrated as frequently and are often overlooked, but they will wreak havoc if not migrated before the domains that have dependencies on them. Their order within the list is determined by the domains that follow them. We will discuss these domains further in a minute. So this list shows the overall hierarchy. If you migrate in this order every time, you will be fine. But sometimes, due to time considerations, it's 11 o'clock on a Wednesday and you won't have time to do everything before noon. There are some subgroups that are independent of others and which will allow you to work with a smaller number of domains. Let's take a look at those. As we've already mentioned, here's the foundation subgroup in a more graphical form. The arrows show the flow. Staff snapshot first, then demographics, then enrollment, and all three are required before programs. Just a note, since we are talking about migration, although you can import programs back by specific categories, for example, you can bring in only your free and reduced lunch data separately. When migrating programs back, you want to make sure all categories are checked every time. If you do not, data in the unchecked categories will not migrate to level 1. The other categories will then be blank at level 1 and level 2. To be safe, always check all categories when migrating. The next group we're going to discuss, or subgroup we are going to discuss, are the independent domains, the items in green on the hierarchy list. In general, these domains do not change much, if at all, throughout the school year. But when they do change, you will need to migrate them again, following the sequence in the hierarchy to ensure the updated data is available prior to migrating domains that have dependencies on them. Let's take a look at each of these domains and the unique requirements. Day calendar identifies instructional days and needs to be migrated prior to any student attendance information. Keep in mind that attendance records for all students will be required for any day reported as an instructional day. Any missing attendance will count as an absence. Although day calendar may not change much throughout the school year, there are those pesky snow days. When those days occur, make sure that you update your day calendar for all your buildings and re-import and migrate. If those snow days are left as instructional days, you may end up with a significant number of missing attendance records, which will affect your chronic absenteeism report. The next couple of independent domains are student and staff attendance codes, numbers 6 and 16 on the hierarchy list. These domains must be migrated before the attendance records for their specific groups. Student attendance codes vary by district and are exported from your student management system. They tend to be fairly stable and typically do not need to be imported during the school year. But never say never, it can happen. Staff attendance codes, unlike student attendance codes, are exactly the same for all districts. The Mid-Hudson Regional Information Center will actually import or preload these codes for all districts at the beginning of the year. You must still migrate this domain prior to importing any staff records. Don't forget. The next independent domain is courses. Again, this domain does not necessarily change frequently, but since your guidance department may not always tell you if they add a new course or change a course code on an existing course, it might be a good idea just to migrate them when you are migrating other course-related data. It is not dependent on any other domains, but there is a lot of data that is dependent on courses, as we will see shortly. And finally, and often overlooked, is location marking period. This is often a one and done occurrence, unless, of course, you change your marking periods mid-year. Let's look at the staff subgroup, which is relatively straightforward. Staff snapshot as one of the foundation domains goes first, then everything else. There is no dependency between staff assignment, staff attendance, staff tenure, and staff evaluation. But someone had to come first, so this is the order they appear in the level 0 dropdown. It's the easiest sequence to remember. Just go down the list as you import or migrate. The only blip in the staff is the staff attendance codes that we just mentioned from the independent domains. Don't forget to migrate these for your district. This should only be needed once a year at the beginning of the school year. And just a quick note on staff evaluation data. This is typically not open for import until July following the school year. And the data collection window extends beyond the closing of the data warehouse in August. Just note, if a teacher is not included in staff snapshot prior to the close of the data warehouse, you will not be able to report staff evaluation data for that teacher, even though that window remains open. Our next subgroup shows data related to calendar and attendance. This data requires demographics and enrollment foundations, and also 2 independent domains of day calendar and student attendance codes. Don't forget those 2 independent domains. You'll know pretty quickly if they are missing. When you import student daily attendance, every record will generate an error if they are not there. So after you have your 2 foundations and your 2 independent domains migrated, you can then migrate your student daily attendance and perhaps go get a coffee while this massive amount of data is loading. As I mentioned previously, you will want to re-import and migrate day calendar whenever you have a change to the school calendar. Those snow days or other days where a building might be closed for various reasons. Okay, now that we've covered the easy ones, let's take a look at the more complex scenario of course-related data. Again, start with the foundations. This time you will need all 3, staff snapshot, demographics, and enrollment. We'll see why in a minute. Then make sure your independent domains of course and location marking period are migrated. Now let's take a look at item number 10, or course instructor assignment. This domain contains data that will link a teacher to a specific section of a course. So a prerequisite for migrating this data is to have your teacher data migrated by a staff snapshot and your course data migrated via courses. Got it? Good. But wait, there's more. Those 2 make sense, but before you can import course instructor assignment, you must also have migrated location marking period. You might say, but why? The reason is that since the teacher is linked to the section of the course, the marking period associated with that section is one of the data fields included in course instructor assignment. So location marking period must be there first. This links the teacher to the correct course for the correct marking period. There are just so many details. Once you have all that set and migrated your course instructor assignment, you can then move on to your student class entry exit. These records will link a student who has previously been migrated in demographic and enrollment with a course and instructor, which was previously migrated in course instructor assignment. Almost there. We now have students enrolled in buildings, linked to courses, and teachers. The only thing left to report are the students' grades or outcomes for those courses. Before you can migrate student class grade detail, you must have successfully migrated the 3 foundation domains, the 2 independent domains, and the 2 course-related domains that are a prerequisite. Notice the white arrows going from left to right between those 3 boxes on the bottom. If you had followed along thus far, it gets easier from here, I promise. The final subgroup is special education data. This will seem like a piece of cake compared to the last one. These domains require demographics and enrollment foundations, things that requires programmed fact. The reason is that type of disability records are reported in programs facts, and only students with disabilities are reported in special education snapshot. There is a dependency on the program's fact data to be migrated. At the end of the year, you may also be required to report special education events. And hopefully by that point, your demographics and enrollment records will be relatively clean, and SE events will migrate easily. Okay, did I say the last slide was our last subgroup? It was, but there are a few miscellaneous domains left. Not surprisingly, the last few domains require the demographics and enrollment foundation domain. We have the new student digital resources domain, which does not have any other dependencies. And finally, assessments, which in some cases require program fact records to have been imported. For example, you cannot import a NYSESLOT assessment if you don't have an ELL eligibility program fact record already imported. So that all makes sense, right? It takes a little getting used to, but if you follow the hierarchy and break it down into the subgroups, you should be all set. But what happens if you don't? Well, you will ultimately have more work. It will take more time. You will be more stressed, and you will have a lot less fun. This is fun, right? You may see one or more consequences for not obeying the hierarchy. You could receive a significant number of import errors. You could receive level 1C errors. You could also receive EDM load errors. There are enough reasons for errors to be generated. Just follow the hierarchy to avoid generating excess and unnecessary errors and save yourself some time. This concludes our presentation on the level 0 migration hierarchy. If you have any questions, please email our help desk at datawarehouse@mhric.org. Thank you.